Life is full of challenges, like when you wave back at someone who's waving at you, only to realise they're waving at a person behind you. Or when someone on the train hasn't switched off the keyboard clicks on their phone, and you're not sure whether you're allowed to throw their phone off the train. Well, BBC Radio 4 has teamed up with some completely made-up scientists to help you deal with everyday problems, from what food you can eat on public transport to exactly when to hold a door open for someone. Narrated by me, David Schneider, with diagrams, graphs and real moving pictures, check out the science of everyday living on the BBC Radio 4 website.
Thanks for downloading Friday Night Comedy from BBC Radio 4. If you want to find out more, visit the Radio 4 website, but not before you listen to this week's Now Show. It's called Topical for a reason, you know.
Hello, I'm Steve Punt.
And I'm Hugh Dennis.
With us are Dane Baptiste, Rachel Parris, Luke Kempner, Jess Ransom and Nish Kumar. And this is...
The Now Show!
Thank you very much. We'd love to start this week with something new and different, but news at the moment seems to mainly consist of... Lamal. No, the news is the same stories, week after week after week. News is starting to feel like an endless series of box set dramas.
No sooner have you got to the series finale of Trump versus Hillary than you're watching the first episode of Trump Appoints Cabinet, while at the same time you're trying to keep up with new episodes of Brexit Means Brexit. This was made clear once again this week when, according to the newspapers, a page of notes made by an aide for Tory MP Mark Field was photographed by reporters.
Accidentally.
The pad included phrases such as...
What's the model?
The same question that was being asked 6 months ago, still no answer. There are various on offer, of course. There's the Swiss model, the Norwegian model, the Canadian model. Apparently Boris Johnson wants to meet all of them before he makes any decision. Other reassuringly detailed technicalities included phrases such as...
Have your cake and eat it? ?
Which either refers to the free movement versus single market argument, or the fact that the EU are unlikely to allow us to have our cake and eat it, because under their regulations, the cake is in fact a biscuit, and we have to pay VAT on it. Another phrase scribbled on the notepad was...
French, likely to be most difficult.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. Especially transitive and intransitive verbs. But honestly, given that this has happened before several times, are government aides really walking out of meetings with their notepad open, facing the cameras with neat handwriting? There were no crossings out and no doodles.
If it was genuine, surely someone would have drawn a massive cartoon knob. Especially if they'd been listening to Liam Fox for 2 hours. The papers, of course, pretended this was a gaffe, but it did look suspiciously deliberate, the aide flashing her notes accidentally on purpose. In fact, it was so obvious it was like something out of a Carry On film.
Oh, look, Sid, you can see everything.
Here, you, stop looking at my notes, cheeky.
Sorry.
She loves it.
Oh, they don't make them like that anymore. Unless UKIP win the next election. In which case they might have to by law.
What it all appeared to show is that no one still seems to know anything at all about Brexit. But reassuringly, the Prime Minister gave an interview and said she would be guided by her faith in God, which seems to fit.
And the people of Britain were held in bondage by the wicked pharaohs of Egypt. But Theresa promised to lead them to the promised land of non-subsidised milk and honey that was not the produce of more than one country. And the people cried out, "How shall we find this promised land? What's the model?" And Theresa said unto them,
I can't tell you that yet, but place your faith in the Almighty.
By which she meant, God knows.
And leaving the EU might now get even more complicated than the tortuous process outlined thus far.
Yes, because this week there was another legal challenge from those who believe membership of the European Union, or EU...
which we voted for in an earlier episode of the...
is entirely separate from membership of the European Economic Area, or EEA.
Which we didn't vote on, and if we want to leave it, Article 50 is entirely irrelevant, because in fact we need to trigger Article 127, which is much further down the list. You have to go past Article 68...
How to classify cakes and biscuits for VAT purposes.
Article 86...
How civil servants should learn to close notepads at the end of meetings.
We may keep up payments even after we've left the EU, according to David Davis. Still, there may be advantages to the coming negotiations being so complicated and difficult. After all, it is the ideal scenario to inspire the gaming industry.
Coming on PS4, Master of Brexit. Fight the elite forces. Negotiate your way through the labyrinth of boredom. Fight the combined ranks of the enemy.
I am a judge of the Supreme Court.
Then prepare to fight.
And I am from the Office of Budget Responsibility.
Your forecasts speak false. You must die.
The ultimate in RPG thrills. Play as Prime Minister.
Brexit means Brexit.
Play as the Juncker.
That is a biscuit, not a cake.
Play as the Tusk.
For God's sake, Britain, just get on with it.
Play as Boris.
Is this Grand Theft Auto? Where are the strippers?
Or play as Jeremy Corbyn.
That character is not available.
Master of Brexit for PS4. This is for the lawyers.
And what of the party that brought it all about? Well, basking in success, UKIP elected a new leader this week. But their old leader was there too and said a few words just to show them that recent events hadn't gone to his head. He told them,
Howdy, partners. It's little old me, same as I ever was. Just blew in to say yee-haw to Limey Lad from a good old buddy Donald. He's one cool dude. He the man. He gonna kick. Bottom. Hasta la vista. Mine's a pint of root beer.
And meanwhile, in Washington, there was another going on as President-elect Trump, who is victorious in that way that only getting 2 million less votes than your opponent can ever do, has finally realised that he can't run the country part-time and is giving up his business interests, although his hotels are still being recommended for visiting foreign delegations, and his team are already offering supporters a chance to have breakfast with the president for a mere $5,000 a head.
The trouble is that Trump is almost certainly the kind of businessman who'll want to do his own advertising.
Come and have breakfast with me. It's so great. Eggs, I have the best eggs. Bacon, I love bacon. ISIS don't like bacon. $5,000, it's a steal, folks. And I have an all-you-can-eat buffet. You can help yourself. It's great, really great. I love helping myself. And for the next 4 years, I'm helping myself to whatever I can. This is a great advert for a hotel. Who needs Lenny Henry? Guy's always falling asleep. Sad.
You've seen Breakfast at Tiffany's. Now try Breakfast at Trump's.
Tiffany was a nasty woman.
There's also talk of the Secret Service renting a whole floor of the building, sharing a hotel with the CIA. Now, that could lead to some misunderstandings.
Do you want me to increase the voltage?
Hello, reception? I'd like to complain about the couple in the next room.
Still, it'll be fun when you first check in.
We offer single, double, king size, and waterboard. Sorry, waterbed.
I don't see anything wrong with it, really. I mean, I think it's quite fun. I think all national leaders should own hotels, if only for the branding.
Premier's Inn.
Thank you very much. So, if you look on iPlayer at the moment, you'll find a show called Sunny D. And if you turn up your radio at the moment, you can enjoy its star, Dane Baptiste.
Thank you and good evening, Radio 4. So, Christmas is getting nearer, but most recently we had Black Friday, an American tradition. But to be honest, I am concerned with the level of influence the US has over the UK now, because Black Friday is not a bank holiday for my people, which is upsetting. It happens at Thanksgiving, where people show thanks for what they have by maiming each other for flat-screen TVs. Worst part is that every year, when you switch on the news, on average, somebody has died during Black Friday, which means there has to be a funeral. What kind of speech do you give at a funeral for somebody that died trying to get bargains? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming at this very sad and solemn time. Janie loves shoes. Some would say too much, I guess. I mean, they say the devil wears Prada, but let's hope that Jesus wears kitten heels, so maybe him and Janie can match, you know. 2016 continues to give a middle finger to the world as the US election has given way to what I and many people have affectionately termed the Trumpocalypse. What is Trump's appeal? We're still wondering. It's because he says it like it is. But I feel like actions speak louder than words, and I can't trust somebody who's not even honest about their hairline. I'm being very honest. Anyone can see that I have a receding hairline myself. Wait, no, this is on radio. I have amazing hair. I got a ponytail. But yeah, to be honest, I didn't really think that Hillary was a suitable candidate either, because I believe that charity begins at home. And if you can't look after one corrupt penis, how are you going to go to a summit about gun control with a room full of them? As well as mobilizing a bunch of black celebrities, Hillary was quoted as using phrases like, "I've got hot sauce in my bag," just like the Beyoncé song. Now, if you don't know who Beyoncé is, people at home, other than Michelle Obama, she is the other First Lady. Clinton was also quoted as saying, "My friend Michelle Obama says," which to me sounds a lot like, "I can say that because I have a black friend." Now, I always think if you're keeping count of your minority friends, that's like a quota, which is a bit more racist, really. Just to remind you, Hillary Clinton, we are people. You can't collect us like My Little Ponies or football stickers. Now, Trump's message to the black voting caucus was, "You've been broke and living in ghettos. What have you got to lose?" And the unanimous response was, "Our lives and freedom." Trump's campaign also included him saying climate change was made up by the Chinese and that he's going to build a wall to protect America from its enemies. The problem is, now he's in office, which means people want him to deliver. Now, where is he going to be able to find some cheap building materials and some expertise from a nation that knows how to build a great wall to protect themselves from their enemies? So there we go. Video killed the radio star, and now reality star is in charge of the free world. I think Kanye said it best in his political statement when he said, "I'd vote for Trump," and then immediately went into a psychiatric facility. Thank you very much. I've been Dane Baptiste. It's Friday, which for me is always Black Friday, where I will not be working. Thank you very much.
Now, there are some British traditions that are just a part of our lives. Cups of tea, cricket on the radio, and Nigel Farage changing his mind about resigning. But this time, it's really all over, as UKIP have chosen a new leader and moved forward into a future they have largely brought about via a referendum they fought for, a remarkable achievement for a party with one MP.
So where are UKIP going? Where did they come from? Do they really believe that gay marriage causes flooding? To tell us, would you please welcome author of the political book of the year 2015, The Revolt on the Right, Professor Matthew Goodwin. And the saga of the UKIP leadership election seems to be over finally with the election of Paul Nuttall. So who is Paul Nuttall?
Well, Paul Nuttall is a former history teacher. He's a northerner. He's from Liverpool. And he's more interested in Labour areas than Nigel Farage ever was interested, really, in Labour areas. So he wants to take the party in a very different direction.
Has he based his look on Ade Edmondson in Bottom?
When you say very different direction, how do you mean? What
well, I mean, if you think about the last few years in British politics, the real territory for UKIP were those southern conservative marginal seats where lots of people felt that David Cameron wasn't a real conservative. Now, however, with Jeremy Corbyn in power and Theresa May sounding like a conservative on steroids, I think Paul Nuttall has said actually the future for his party is those working-class, northern industrial Labour heartlands.
And why would former Labour voters swing towards UKIP?
Well, across Europe, one of the big developments over the last 20 years has been the way in which the radical right has won over voters who used to support the left. And the reason for that is that those voters are economically left-wing. They want more redistribution. They feel like globalisation is doing them down. But on cultural issues, they're right-wing. So they want less immigration. They're worried about traditional values being lost. And so in places like Yorkshire and Sunderland, you've got lots of voters who are economically left-wing, but quite socially conservative and so open to the UKIP message.
And this is this idea of cultural insecurity, is that right? So you feel You know, everything is changing, it's all changing too fast, so you swing to the right.
That cultural insecurity issue is really front and centre because it's, you know, the left historically has argued this is all about economic inequality. The right has realised that actually people also care about more diffuse things like values and national identity and borders and security. So the left is really struggling. Across Europe, social democracy essentially is sort of on its knees, really struggling to keep going.
The other thing I was really interested about with Paul Nuttall's agenda is that there's also a perception that UKIP's typical voter skews older, shall we say. Do they want to attract younger voters, and do you think Paul Nuttall's interested in that?
I think they have to be because the average UKIP voter is over 65 years of age, so, you know, the future isn't looking so rosy. But, you know, also the Economist and other sort of similar newspapers like this argument that, well, actually, populism's going to go away soon because of all of its voters are quite sort of old and elderly and so on. Now, if you look at Austria, really interesting case, 42% of supporters of the populist right in Austria are 18 to 30. So I'm sort of pushing back against that and saying, actually, well, there are cases where populism, like all other political ideas, can reinvent and can reconnect with new generations. I mean, baby boomers, they had it great. But if you're 25 and you're in the UK right now, the future isn't looking so great.
If UKIP got into power, is their talent pool deep? I mean, they've had... How many goes have they had at...
I have no idea why that's funny.
At finding a leader, haven't they? So they had. This is their fourth leader in however many months, isning it? Or third?
Yes, so some of it. To be honest, I've lost count.
You've lost count. Yeah. So, but they can't find a leader. So if they had to fill all sorts of positions and actually run the country, how deep is their...
To be honest, I don't think we'll ever be confronted with a scenario... Well, after 2016, you never say never. I mean, you know, anything's possible. But I personally don't think we'll be confronted with that scenario, maybe. What's also quite interesting about populism in Europe is we have had populists in government. We've had populist parties in coalitions. And generally, they haven't been as sort of scary and radical as many people would have you believe. They've been quite moderate or they've been constrained by their partners. Now, Trump is different. Trump is going to be really interesting to watch. Is he a neoconservative, an ultra-conservative, or actually is he going to do some pretty shady stuff? We've got to wait and see. And also, I mean, if you think about where we might be, if we were having this conversation 12 months from now, you could potentially have President Marine Le Pen, President Hofer in Austria, he's far right. You could have a populist prime minister in Italy, and you could have Geert Wilders in the Netherlands with more seats than any other party in Dutch politics. That is now plausible. If we were here 5 years ago, that would have seemed impossible.
But at that point, if you have those leaders in all the various countries, are you then thinking, why on earth are we leaving the EU? Because the EU is falling apart anyway, what? Or not?
I think the next 12 months are going to be incredibly difficult for the European Union. You've got a series of mega events coming. The Italian referendum, you've got the Austrian presidential election, you've got the French presidential election, you've got no growth, you've got really high levels of voter distrust, you've got the refugee crisis, you've got the lingering financial crisis. I mean, would you really want to be Merkel right now?
I think it may be time for me to say, Merry Christmas, everyone.
What is Nigel Farage going to do now, do you think?
Well, I'm slightly confused. I interviewed Nigel Farage quite a few times, and I was always under the impression that after life in UKIP, he was sort of going to become a sort of Michael Portillo type figure and sit on the sofa and be a kind of television celebrity. And then I turned on the TV and I saw him in Mississippi on a stage with Donald Trump. So I guess his ambitions are bigger than perhaps they were 6 months ago. And he's said publicly he wants to try and work with other Eurosceptic movements in Europe, and he wants to try and replicate what he feels he created in Britain and other European states. And I have to say, I mean, one really interesting thing about British politics is we have a radical right party that basically isn't in Parliament, but it's achieved more than any other radical right party in Europe, if you think about Brexit. So that's a really interesting development, and it shows that you don't need to have seats in Westminster to have political influence.
No, we would do it in a quiet British way. Thank you very much, Matthew Goodwin.
And now, would you please welcome back to the Now Show, Nish Kumar.
Greetings. I'm Nish Kumar, comedian and former kissing partner to over 3 women. I often talk about politics on stage, which means 2016 has been fascinating for me. We are living through a historic period, a political upheaval the like of which has not been seen for generations. And you can trust me on this, I've got half a history degree, and I once saw Simon Sharma on a bus eating a Twix. Actually, come to think of it, it might have been someone who looked like Simon Sharma, but it was definitely a Twix. but maybe I shouldn't be so quick to tout my qualifications, impressive though they clearly are. After all, 2016 is the year that, according to Michael Gove, we showed...
people in this country have had enough of experts.
This week has seen more hostility towards so-called experts. The Institute for Fiscal Studies released a report suggesting that wages are going to stagnate to the extent that by 2021 they will not have recovered to their pre-financial crisis levels in 2008. Paul Johnson, the director of the IFS, said this fact was...
extraordinary and dreadful.
Which is coincidentally how one critic described my 2013 Edinburgh Festival show. The IFS has based these figures on the analysis by the Office of Budget Responsibility, whose findings heavily informed last week's autumn statement. The IFS, the OBR and Philip Hammond's proposals have been met with howls of outrage from sections of the press and various politicians. John Redwood, the Conservative minister and man who is frequently described as...
oh, yeah, him.
entered the fray, claiming that the OBR and the IFS
have got their Brexit gloom glasses on.
Available from Specsavers in 2017. And Jacob Rees-Mogg was on Newsnight. Now, truly, he is a fascinating personality. I almost can't believe he's real. The only way Jacob Rees-Mogg makes any sense is if it turns out he was being played by Sacha Baron Cohen the entire time. And his whole career has been one long Borat-style prank. Rees-Mogg was on Newsnight, blasting the doom-mongers. He said...
there's a great line from Cicero. There's nothing so absurd that it hasn't been said by some philosopher.
Before going on to say...
experts, soothsayers, astrologers are all in much the same category.
Definitely a strange turn of phrase there, putting experts in the category of soothsayers and astrologers. It does suggest that if Rees-Mogg requires any dental work, he visits Russell Grant and that Mystic Meg does his taxes. But I am just surprised at this venom. The OBR and the IFS are not political organisations. They're just reacting to data that's been placed in front of them. The head of the OBR, Robert Choate, has said that this is not a guarantee of what will happen post-Brexit, just a worst-case scenario forced on the OBR because they have no idea what the terms of Brexit are going to be. Without information on what money we're going to save from EU fees, they are only left able to predict the worst-case scenario. Their hands are tied by the secrecy of the negotiations currently taking place between the EU and our Brexit minister, child of unimaginative naming magazine's Parents of the Year, David Davis. Win's a win, what can you say? It's not a guarantee of doom, but a worst-case scenario based on an absence of fact. Philip Hammond would be irresponsible to not prepare for the worst under these circumstances. And I'm surprised Jacob Rees-Mogg, of all people, is so hostile to this fact-based analysis, given that he's an admirer of Cicero. I found 2 quotes by Cicero that I think are very interesting.
The wise are instructed by reason, average minds by experience, the stupid by necessity, and the brute by instinct.
And?
Do not listen to Jacob Rees-Mogg. That guy is a total arsehole.
Very wise man, Cicero. Wise and specific. And let's face it, he was really playing the long game with that second quote. I imagine at the time people were baffled. Now everyone's like, what, Cicero? Yeah, legend. I'm still not entirely sure where this hostility towards experts comes from, but we're definitely seeing it on both sides of the Atlantic. If you disagree with the conclusions that these organisations have come to, surely the answer is to respond in kind, with reason-based arguments, not a blanket dismissal or selectively quoting Roman philosophers. It does suggest that either they don't have the data because they secretly agree with the assessment of the OBR, or that they can't be bothered to look these things up. Either that, or it suggests that Rees-Mogg et al. Think we're incapable of understanding facts or complex debate, which is patronising beyond belief. We must demand a higher level of discourse from our political leaders. And where's Nigel Farage with all this going on? Last week, he was busy having a party thrown at his honour at the Ritz, surrounded by a group of millionaires and career politicians. Reports emerged of flowing champagne and a pyramid of Ferrero Rocher being passed around in a reference to Donald Trump's suggestion that Nigel Farage be made the British ambassador in America. So just to summarise, Nigel Farage was at a party at the Ritz with a bunch of millionaires drinking champagne, a French drink, and eating Ferrero Rocher, an Italian chocolate. If Nigel Farage had any shred of loyalty towards this country, that party would have happened in the car park of a travel lodge in Croydon with a bunch of disgruntled football fans all drinking cans of Special Brew, and instead of Ferrero Rocher, everyone would have been eating a Terry's chocolate orange and not in slices, just biting it like an apple. That is how we do things in this country. God save the Queen.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rachel Parris.
I'm addressing the really serious stuff this week, a recent blow to the cultural life of the UK.
A country in need of a champion to build up hope and break down walls. If it wasn't this year, we'd hold out for a hero, but it's 2016, so we'll take Ed Balls. He burst on our screens, Labour's first dancing queen, and he moved like your dad at a rave. The Swayze of Westminster pulled quite the convincer. The public all voted to save. Don't trust the public. And week after each cheek to cheek, his technique soon became quite a thriller. And if one step was mistimed, he knew at least this time he wouldn't lose out to a Miliband. His two left feet seemed to go down a treat. How we love an MP in fake tan. He sambered, he tangoed, he played the air banjo in the most taxing move since his 5-point plan. I'm sure defeat must sting, but we won't miss his thrusting, and Gangnam, I think, just felt wrong. But how he'll be missed, I can't see Corbyn doing this. Yes, the cha-cha-cha Chancellor's gone. Oh, Ed came in from the left, centre-left, and he quick-stepped right into our hearts. But there's strictly no way he can pass a double, so it's prime time for Ed to depart. But the X Factor's now taking course, so don't take your eye off the balls.
Well, the Richmond by-election was enlivened this week when one of the candidates, Zac Goldsmith, managed to be struck by his own car. And on the basis of this, we have asked our audience, what is the stupidest way that you have ever injured yourself?
I have a hernia from pushing Zac Goldsmith's car.
After a week paragliding without incident, I fell off the baggage carousel at Luton Airport.
I cracked my head open on the dado rail.
I dislocated my left knee making Christmas cards.
I once had a mince pie that I had made myself and broke my tooth on a screw my husband had dropped in the mincemeat.
There's a bit of a theme emerged from quite a lot of these, of very middle-class ways of injuring yourself. I dropped the food processor blade while making a souffle. And even better, I burned my arm plunging the cafetiere too vigorously.
I knocked myself out on a toilet rim when throwing up after accidentally using the cat's toothpaste, turkey flavoured. We've all been there, haven't we?
Yes. So thank you very much for those. I hope that's cheered you up a bit, Zac. You are not alone. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye. You've been listening to The Now Show, starring Steve Punt, Hugh Dennis, Dane Baptiste, Rachel Parris, Jess Ransom, Luke Kempner, Nish Kumar and Matthew Goodwin. It was written by the cast with additional material from Jane Lammercraft, Sarah Morgan, Sophie Duker and Robin Morgan. The producer was Adnan Ahmed. It was a BBC Studios production. That was The Now Show from Friday Night Comedy on BBC Radio 4. If you've enjoyed this download, why not visit the Radio 4 website, where you'll find other programmes to download and keep forever, entirely free.